and welcome to our 5th episode in the Brand Bewitchery series, as I take you through each chapter of my guidebook to help you wield the story cycle system to craft spellbinding stories for your brand. I'm Park Howell, host of the Business of Story, and today you will learn how to leverage the antagonistic forces your brand is up against. I call them villains, fog, and crevasses. And why you want to take them on is because they will propel your business forward. After all, the marrow of every compelling story, including the one about your brand, is about struggle and tension. As I like to say, no conflict, no story. With Chapter 5 of Brand Bewitchery, we are squarely in Act 2 in crafting your brand story. This is where we explore all of those competitive forces that at first can look like they may doom your brand. But I will show you how to leverage them using the jujitsu of storytelling to make your product or service the most timely, relevant, and urgent offering in your customer's life. We will also explore the villains, fog, and crevasses that confront your colleagues, prospects, customers, and stakeholders, and how you, as the brand, are there to help them overcome these obstacles and antagonists. There is no better way to prove the promise behind your unique value proposition than to embrace the challenges ahead. But before we get started, I want to remind you that if you'd like help in crafting your brand story, or you would like you and your team to do a better job of capturing and sharing your existing brand story, then give me a call. I'm available for in-person team training, virtual mastery courses, an amazing deliberate practice program, or hybrid training to help you and your people excel through the stories you tell. Just shoot me a note to park@businessofstory.com. After all, you have to understand the magic to cast the storytelling spell. Chapter 5, Antagonists, How to Capitalize on Competitive Forces. Quote, story equals character plus predicament plus attempted extrication. Jonathan Gottschall, author of The Storytelling Animal, How Stories Make Us Human. Embrace your antagonists. You have the wish to clarify your brand story. You want a proven system to improve your odds of fulfilling your wish, so you're working through the story cycle system. Your will to progress is fueled by market events that are impacting your brand. You must position yourself against growing competition. You need to engage employees to get them all pulling in the same direction. Recruiting and retaining top talent is paramount to your success. And you want to answer decisively when someone asks you, "What's your story?" But the universe is testing you. It throws all kinds of obstacles and antagonists in your path just to see how badly you really want it. These threshold guardians are many and varied. They include aggressive competitors, internal confusion about what you stand for, ghastly gaps in your performance, in addition to all of the hurdles you experience when reaching out to your customers to buy your product or service. You're competing for their attention, their mind share, and their money. Maybe they don't understand your offering, or perhaps you haven't bridged the gap between their wish and want, so consequently, they don't have the will to proceed with you. In this chapter, we'll explore the 3 categories of story tension you will want to embrace and exploit in your brand story to make your offering more urgent than your competition's, because story tension is actually a good thing. It provides the mystery, surprise, and delight in your stories that your audiences relish. There's a reason why the oldest story in the world is, quote, "A man falls into a hole, man gets out." Life is about conflict, resolution, and the growth that results. So instead of pushing your antagonists away, embrace them to capitalize on their power. For your brand storytelling purposes, I've broken these antagonists down into 3 primary categories: villains, fog, and crevasses. Villains are defined by internal and external competitive forces, including competitors undercutting you, resource scarcity like time, money, and staff, and your internal demons that summon fear and self-doubt to demoralize and detour you. Fear is often our greatest foil. Fog is your blind spots. What you don't know, you don't know. But to your credit, even though you're not totally sure yet that you're on the right path with your brand story, at least this book has equipped you with a proven field guide to help you navigate the jungle and clear the air. Crevasses are the gaps between your mental plans and your operational execution. You think and say one thing, but you're doing something else. I'm not throwing you under the bus here. We all do this. But you must mind the gap because your new brand story will be making big, wish-fulfilling promises to your audiences, and you'll need to deliver on those promises. The jujitsu trick is not to combat these forces, but to use them to your advantage, to further power your will and catapult your offering. Plus, when you examine the villains, fog, and crevasses that confront your customers, and you can help them overcome these obstacles and antagonists, you become the go-to brand. You play the important role of mentor in their life, which we will cover in the next chapter. Find the hurt, amplify the pain, heal the wound. I was sitting in founder and CEO Trevor Hill's office at Global Water when he told me his jarring definition of sales that I related in Chapter 4. Quote, in sales, all you do is find the hurt, amplify the pain, and heal the wound, end quote. Global Water is a local water utility that has become an international leader in the reclamation and reuse of water in arid communities. Trevor learned his brand of water management as a water resource officer on aircraft carriers in the Royal Canadian Navy. So it made sense that he was now in the desert, where conservation is at a premium, building a company that ensured the provision of clean and safe water. The chief villain in the Global Water brand story is wasting water. We designed a customized market category for Global Water within the water utility industry that defined their position as experts at, quote, resource scarcity management, end quote. Conscientious water management and delivery is what they make. Protecting this crucial resource for generations to come is what they make happen. And without the focused mission of combating water waste, Global Water would be just another water utility. So why did they call us in to help? Because Trevor wished to differentiate his company from the typical utilities that just delivered water. He wanted to demonstrate water conservation at the service level to encourage customers to do the same. Plus, Global Water's brand of water utility made solid business sense too. Instead of delivering water, handling the sewage, treating the effluents, dumping it back into the ground as state regulations required for additional filtering and water loss, by the way, and then pumping it back out again and starting the cycle all over, it made much more financial sense to treat it at the source and return it to customers. Technology had advanced to the point that this was a healthy, viable approach to water management, but old mindsets die hard. To become successful in the early 2000s at their innovative approach to reclaiming and reusing water in our communities, Global Water needed to sell regulators on the importance of reuse. They had to help regulators overcome their primary villain, which was their belief that recycled water was not clean water. To defeat this villain, Global Water demonstrated the latest highly effective water purification technology and told stories about how European communities are using this technology to save millions of gallons of water and tons of money. But villains weren't the only antagonists at play. Trevor and his team had to clear up the fog around the tremendous waste associated with current water management practices of delivery, sewage, treatment, pumping back into and then out of the ground, retreatment, and redelivery. They opened regulators' eyes to technology through facility tours and informational meetings, and they built a community educational center to help residences and businesses understand the new way to use and reuse water, thereby increasing their conservation ethos. Finally, there was an enormous crevasse between what public officials were saying in their publicity campaigns about the need for everyone to responsibly conserve water and what they were actually doing in municipal water management. While Global Water was a forward-thinking utility, it was not telling their brand story because they hadn't yet captured it. By going through the story cycle system, they clearly understood how to use the villains, fog, and crevasses to their advantage. Trevor built one of the fastest growing, purpose-driven water utilities in the country. You might think Trevor's definition of sales is a bit on the dark side, but it makes sense, especially given our natural negativity bias in service to our survival. His definition is in perfect 3-act story structure too. Find the hurt equals setup, amplify the pain equals problem, heal the wound equals resolution. To me, this is just another example of how our minds are wired for the setup, problem, resolution framework, because processing knowledge in this fashion is how our primal storytelling apparatus ensures our survival as a species. So in the first 4 chapters of this guidebook, you are finding the hurt. What problem do you solve better than anyone else? Who cares? What do they, your customers, want to solve? And why do they want to solve it? What doesn't kill you? In this chapter, you are learning how to amplify the pain to make your brand story even more compelling. You do this by asking how you can help your customers overcome their internal and external barriers to heal their wound. By articulating for them the various obstacles and antagonists they face, you are also demonstrating that you understand what they're up against. This creates connection and empathy. They feel you are like them and have their back. This is when trust is built. Stories reveal a truth that creates trust. They start to feel that your story is their story. This leads to brand adoption and appreciation, which in turn equals sales and money for you. In the mythic structure of Campbell's hero's journey, this portion of the story is called Tests, Allies, and Enemies. The stakes are being raised and the pressure is mounting for the central character. That's why this is a natural juncture for your villains, fog, and crevasses to surface. First, determine what obstacles and antagonists are out to thwart the growth of your brand. It's kind of like a story SWOT analysis. And then identify the oppositional forces that your customers must overcome to buy into your brand story. For instance, if you're battling the nasty villain of obfuscation to create meaning for your brand, then the service business of story offers wouldn't be relevant to your journey. Obfuscation runs with a crusty henchman of confusion who's out to muddle your messaging. Oh, and don't forget boredom. He's always just sitting there dragging his big toe through the dirt and the shadows. He's subtly sadistic because when was the last time you were bored into buying anything? So you're leveraging the story cycle system to overcome these antagonists. The win comes in creating clarity to align your people with a focused vision. But the clearing of the fog reveals more obstacles in the way, gaps in performance that you must close. By tackling these challenges, you add even greater significance to your mission for your people as they rally against a common foe. Without these competitive market forces and the adverse operational dynamics, you would remain motionless in status quo. You simply would have no reason to do anything but sit there. But do you know what's the most hideous example of a villain that damages the performance of a brand? It's the worst kind of adversary. It's shiny and alluring, but this bully clouds the ego with false praise while it widens the performance gap between perception and reality, setting up the recipient for a fall. This villain is called the participation trophy. You know those insidious totems of childhood? They are presented without merit to any kid anywhere who happens to show up, even occasionally in a uniform, even on the crappiest team in the league. I believe that participating should be encouraged but not rewarded. The prize comes in the form of positive outcomes, especially when the odds are stacked against you. Trophies are just an ego-inflating symbol of success. If I were a Russian despot hatching a cunning plan to weaken a generation of Americans, I'd encourage the culture, in the name of fairness, to give every child a participation trophy, regardless of their ability to contribute to a common cause. It's brilliant, because in man's quest to counter natural competitive forces with participation trophies, we temporarily short-circuit the pervasive evolutionary dynamic of survival of the fittest, which wins out in the end. The meek inherit a trophy, and they may even inherit the world, but they will be trounced by committed market competition. When have you ever received anything of value for nothing? It is just these antagonistic forces, the ones punching us in the nose on the playing field of life, that imbue our offering with value. The adage, no conflict, no story, rings true with your brand too. These headwinds provide the lift every fulfilling life requires, the unique problems every brand solves, and the tension every story needs to propel the journey forward. Think of an airplane. It can't take off unless it is accelerating into a headwind. It requires determined thrust from its engines while maintaining the proper attitude to use air pressure to overcome the relentless tug of gravity. Only when thrust and attitude are aligned does it achieve its precise altitude. The higher, faster, and farther it wants to go, the greater the natural forces the pilot must overcome. Attitude and effort are the only two things you really control in life, no matter what it chooses to throw at you. So embrace the villains, fog and crevasses that are trying to stop you, and capitalize on their energy to transport you, your brand, and your people to another world. As Nietzsche wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." How social resistance provides brand lift. In September 2016, Luis Miguel contacted me about helping refine AvantPage's brand story. For the previous 22 years, Luis and his team have provided language translation services for government, elections officials, healthcare, and educational programs to help immigrants assimilate in this country. AvantPage is headquartered in Davis, California, and has offices in Mexico City and Warsaw, Poland. In 1973, Luis Miguel traveled from his home in Mexico City to the Ozark Mountains in Missouri for summer camp. It was his first visit to the United States. He was 15 years old. He was excited to experience America, but his excitement quickly dimmed when a boy at camp referred to Luis using a term he had never heard before. Being bookish, Luis returned home and looked up the meaning of wetback. 5 years later, with imperfect language skills, Luis returned to America to study at the University of Colorado at Boulder, but the university seemed cold and intimidating. So he moved to the University of California at Davis to study agriculture, and he worked with migrant families in appalling farm conditions. Luis graduated and earned his PhD in computer science at the University of California, Berkeley, but he never forgot those migrant families. A few years later, Luis and his wife began a family of their own. Quote, "I realized that the difference for kids is where they are born. These experiences made me sensitive to the plight of immigrants in the U.S. and especially those who need special language support to connect with the people and institutions of America." End quote. In 1996, Luis started AvantPage, an international translation firm. He combined the need for linguistics with compassion and empathy for immigrants. Luis, following many rough experiences assimilating into America, wished to help others realize their American dream. He wanted to create a translation company like no other that connects people, cultures, and communities. And the nationalism and polarization he sees growing around the world gives him the will to make an even greater difference in immigrant lives. But Luis realized that their specialized translation work wasn't being recognized. The AvantPage brand blended in with myriad other translation firms. He knew it was time to refresh the company's brand story to ensure its growth and sustainability. But many obstacles stood in his way, including the risk of being commoditized in a crowded translation market. This market pressure, like other incidents that have propelled Luis's story forward, are what prompted him to seek us out and write the next chapter of the AvantPage story. He refined his brand in 2017 using the story cycle system. The return on his new brand story has already been impressive, including 1. 30% more new business prospects since launching AvantPage's refreshed brand story. 2. AvantPage's organic search rankings dramatically improved because its new brand narrative focused on the SEO terms most relevant to its offering. 3. The website conversion rate quadrupled because now AvantPage is speaking the language of its ideal customer. 4. Since rebranding, AvantPage has experienced a 200% increase in applicants who mention that they feel connected to the brand's new mission of helping immigrants. 5. AvantPage reports a massive increase in employee interaction and enthusiasm for its refreshed brand. This all sounds great, but you're probably interested in what exactly Luis did to achieve these things. Let me detail how the AvantPage brand story came together. We'll go through the entire AvantPage story cycle, and you then can use this example as yet another guide to help you craft your own brand narrative. Step 1, backstory. Where in the world have you been? Claiming your number one position in the market to focus your story. What do you do differently and more distinctively than your competition? We arrived at AvantPage's brand position statement by having them define what industry, category, and specialty they operate in. Industry, communications. Category, language service provider. Specialty, translation services. But this isn't enough to separate them from their competition. AvantPage, like all brands, must lay claim to their number one specialty in the market. Declare your number one position and you can become the go-to resource for your specialty. Here's what they arrived at. Brand position statement. AvantPage is the number one resource for translation services to help governments, healthcare, and democratic elections connect with and empower immigrant populations. By declaring their number one position in the crowded language translation market, AvantPage began to focus on what they do exceedingly well and, more important, why they do it, to empower immigrant populations. Can you see how their story is already starting to elevate the brand from just being another B2B translation company to one that stands for something greater? Step 2, heroes. Who's your audience? Identify your target audiences to make your message resonate. Who cares the most about your product or service? Who are you for? These are the audiences you want to invite into and buy into your brand story. In AvantPage's brand story, they prioritize their audiences in this order. Audience number 1, employees. Audience number 2, customers. Audience number 3, vendors/linguists. It often makes sense to identify your employees as your top audience when it comes to rebranding because you need to get them to believe in and model your story before you share it with your customers. Sometimes brands place customers first before they get buy-in from their own people, which can lead to an awkward and weak launch of your new and refreshed brand story. And don't forget about your suppliers. They are an important part of your story because they operate as de facto extensions of your brand. You want them living into and prospering from your story too. Step 3, stakes. What's at stake? Clarify what your audiences seek so you can connect on a deeper level through understanding and empathy. Once AvantPage identified their primary audiences, they clarified what was at stake for each, what they wish for and want relative to the AvantPage offering. Audience number 1, employees. Employees wish to make a difference in immigrant lives and want to participate in a new brand story that they can live into and prosper from. Audience number 2, customers. AvantPage customers wish to feel the satisfaction of helping their constituents by providing clear communication, and they want the most timely, accurate, and trustworthy translations possible from a caring provider. Audience number 3, vendors/linguists. Vendors and linguists who serve AvantPage wish to be appreciated for the valuable service they provide and want to be treated with respect while applying their craft to a consistent volume of meaningful work. As you may notice, what's at stake for each of these audiences is not so much about wanting/needing the physical translations that the brand provides, that's a given, but wishing for the trust, integrity, and fulfillment that comes from engaging with an honorable brand like AvantPage. By understanding these psychological needs, we elevate the AvantPage offering in the hearts and minds of its audiences. This leads to the next step of articulating what this all means through their unique value proposition. Step 4, disruption, the call to adventure. Declare your unique value proposition to create brand distinction. To take your first big step out of the primordial muck of commoditization, you must battle status quo by changing yourself. To do that, you either have to be the disruptive force in the market or position your brand as the answer to the disruption others are creating in the market. Either way, your goal is to become the most timely, relevant, and urgent offering in response to changing conditions. But that takes guts. AvantPage decided to separate itself from the pack by being the disruptive leader, having the courage to become an activist brand. This was an especially timely ethos in 2016, given the chaos and polarized leadership in D.C., the proposed border wall between America and Mexico, the nationalism that was turning its back on immigration. AvantPage isn't just about providing trusted translation services. They are the translation company to work with when you actually care about helping immigrants realize their American dream. Once they got clear on this fact that their brand story isn't about what they make, translations, but what they make happen, helping immigrants realize their American dream, then everything else came into focus, including their unique value proposition. AvantPage, with empathy beyond words, helps immigrants overstand their brave new world. Yes, you read that right, overstand. Their UVP is based on the concept of, quote, overstanding, end quote. Overstanding came from the global hip-hop culture. Artists coined the term to portray the distinction between the understanding that life is difficult and the overstanding that life is more difficult than it needs to be because it is in the interest of those in power to keep things as they are. The Urban Dictionary defines overstanding as follows. The distinction between overstanding and understanding is a matter of context and awareness. To overstand is to comprehend a thing itself and to have knowledge of why it is the way it is and of its place or role in the grand scheme of things. If you can use something or do a job, you understand and memorize enough to act. One who understands may also be able to innovate or redesign, but otherwise accepts the boundaries of a thing as given. Those who overstand appreciate the bigger picture and their rightful place in it. The concept of overstanding became the linchpin of the AvantPage activist brand story. It led to its brand theme, overstanding with empathy beyond words. Step 5, antagonists, villains, fog, and crevasses. Take advantage of opposing market forces to strengthen your brand performance. As we've explored in this chapter, every story has its obstacles and antagonists that stand in the way of the hero's success. For AvantPage, these competitive forces included villains, what they termed bigwig vendors, fly-by-night operators, and DIY online platforms, essentially their competitors. Fog. Many of AvantPage's customers didn't realize that these competitors provide impersonal, transactional, and often imprecise translations. Crevasses. The competition not only vies for AvantPage's customers, but often soils the industry's reputation through unreliable service and shoddy translations. These kinds of market dynamics are important to your brand story. This story tension is what you position your brand against to strengthen your UVP, what you stand for, and how you deliver on your promises, your effort and attitude. You can stop here if you like and start doing the worksheet at the end of this chapter to determine your villains, fog, and crevasses. But a lot of clients ask for examples of how others have used the story cycle system. So here's the rest of the AvantPage story. Step 6, mentor. Humanize your brand with its promise, gift, and personality to build belief and trust. At this halfway point of the story cycle system, we focus on the personality of your brand. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here because we will detail the following 5 story cycle system steps in the following 5 chapters, but I'm including AvantPage's final brand story elements here as an easy reference for you to return to. Your findings in this stage, which will be covered in Chapter 6, will shape the personality of your brand, including look, feel, tone, and content, etc. Emotionally, what does your brand provide to every one of your audiences? What is the psychological thread that weaves them all together? For AvantPage, that emotion is trust. It's important to define your brand promise because it becomes the aspirational North Star that your employees will steer toward. Again, the brand gift is a reflection of your brand mantra. It's not what you make, but what you make happen. For AvantPage, what they make happen in the lives they touch is the phenomenon of overstanding. Understanding is knowledge, while overstanding is wisdom from experience, the intrinsic gift AvantPage provides. As an activist brand, AvantPage provides overstanding to everyone they encounter. Now that you have determined physically and philosophically what you provide to your audience, it's time to determine the personality of your brand. In working with AvantPage, we use Swiss psychologist Carl Jung's 12 primary personality archetypes. We'll cover brand archetypes in the next chapter too. AvantPage selected the caregiver as its primary archetype, which is a direct reflection of the earnestness of its founder, Luis. Then they selected regular guy/gal and the hero as supporting archetypes, which speaks to their easygoing but activist mentality. Kind of like President Teddy Roosevelt's famous line, speak softly and carry a big stick. In the case of AvantPage, they operate with empathy beyond words through their caregiver archetype with a hint of regular guy/gal for depth. Then the hero archetype colors its attitude towards helping immigrants overstand their situation to provide them agency to act. These personalities are combined to reflect the character of AvantPage, which encourages immigrants to find their personal agency in their quest for the American dream. Brand promise is trust. Brand gift is overstanding. Brand personality, caregiver. Secondary archetypes, regular guy/gal, and hero. Step 7, journey. Increase customer engagement through the stories you tell. Once you've arrived at your brand's promise, gift, and character archetype, find 9 one-word descriptors that support your personality. These are important because you'll use them as story themes throughout your customer engagement to move your audience from brand awareness to adoption to appreciation and beyond. I'll take you through an exercise in Chapter 7 to help you find your 9 one-word descriptors. Think of 3 words that describe your company, 3 words that define your offering, and 3 words that detail your customer service. Here's what AvantPage arrived at. Brand descriptors. Their company. Excellence. Rigorous. Trusted. Their offering. Empathy. Camaraderie. Opportunity. Outcomes. Empower. Advocate/activist. Knowledge. AvantPage used their descriptors as one-word themes to find and share their brand stories. The resulting true stories demonstrate the real-world impact AvantPage has on its customers and the communities they serve. By exploring the AvantPage website, you can see for yourself how AvantPage uses these descriptors to support their personality and guide the creation of their creative communications. Step 8, victory. Celebrate wins on the customer journey of brand awareness to adoption through appreciation. One of the big mistakes your brand can make is not planning for the small success milestones your audiences will experience as they engage with your company. Consider how you will celebrate each success point with your customers when they pass through the thresholds of brand awareness, adoption, and appreciation. I won't divulge how AvantPage is building bonds with its audiences, but suffice it to say that having a plan in this area helps you move your customers from brand appreciation to evangelism. You'll learn how to do this in Chapter 8, Victory. It was at this point that we brought together everything from the first 7 steps of the story cycle system and captured it in AvantPage's brand statement. Brand statement. AvantPage, with empathy beyond words, empowers immigrants to achieve their American dream through trusted language translations. We help them grasp the nature and significance of an ideal or issue, strive for complete and intuitive comprehension so that they can connect with and navigate through their brave new world and truly overstand their journey. Step 9, moral. Articulate your purpose to elevate the meaning of your brand. Through the first 9 steps of the story cycle system, we humanized the AvantPage brand narrative and we elevated the visceral meaning of AvantPage to a level that would make Maslow proud. In step 1, we identified AvantPage's features and functions, or their physiological needs, to determine their number one position in the world, what AvantPage does differently and more distinctively than their competition. Then we stepped up to safety in Maslow's hierarchy by understanding their audiences and what's at stake for them in their journey. We leveled up to life and belonging as captured in AvantPage's unique value proposition. AvantPage, with empathy beyond words, helps immigrants overstand their brave new world. And then we developed their personality in the mentor phase to create esteem around the brand, supported by its 9 descriptors. Here, AvantPage activates its personality by mapping customer engagement and celebrating the victories, large and small, along the way. Now we're at Maslow's self-actualization step in the story cycle system as we define AvantPage's brand purpose. Brand purpose. AvantPage exists to help all immigrants realize their American dream. In Chapter 9, we will ask you to declare your brand purpose, why your brand exists to help people beyond making money. It's worth repeating. It's not what you make, but what you make happen. That is what your brand story is all about. AvantPage exists to help immigrants realize their American dream. They just happen to do it through precise translation services to help their customers understand what's really going on in their world. Step 10, ritual. Design your brand rituals for repeat business. Now your goal is to make your brand a significant part of your customers' lives. How do you build repeat business by becoming a ritual? The answer to that question is through evangelism. Make your story their story, and they will share it with their world. Word-of-mouth marketing is your most powerful and least expensive form of advertising. It leads to referrals and a growing business. Once you have people promoting your brand, you will have elevated your customers from brand awareness through adoption to appreciation. This is how you humanize your brand. Stand for something greater. Connect with audiences and customers on a deeper level by speaking their language, and exercise your own empathy beyond words. Now it's your turn. Here's how we at the Business of Story have outlined the villains, fog, and crevasses in our own journey. Our steps will provide a template for you to follow. First, you want to outline what your brand is up against and then identify the obstacles and antagonists that your audiences are trying to overcome. The Business of Story, villains, fog, and crevasses. Villains, lots of emerging gurus and the need to differentiate the Business of Story brand. Fog, clarifying our brand story online to feature our consulting, masterclasses, and speaking services. Crevasses, how to scale our enterprise with extremely efficient resources. The villains, fog, and crevasses for our number one audience, founder/CEO of an emerging enterprise. Villains, emerging competition is eroding your market share, and internally there is confusion about the direction of the brand. Fog, your people aren't bought into a consistent brand narrative which is adversely impacting performance. Crevasses, you are unable to clearly articulate your brand story to shareholders and stakeholders. The antagonists faced by directors of marketing, sales, or HR. Villains, your external and internal competitive forces are keeping your teams from pulling together on a focused mission. Fog, people are unclear about the brand story and how to use storytelling to grow sales, marketing, and internal initiatives. Crevasses, people are telling lots of different stories because they lack the tools to create a unified storytelling culture. The antagonist for industrious executives. Villains. You face much competition for mindshare and need personal brand differentiation. Fog. You haven't clearly identified and communicated the moments/stories that define your character. Crevasses. You aren't using your storytelling skills to connect on a human level with the people you're trying to influence. Brand Bewitchery comes with worksheets so that you can fill out the villains, fog, and crevasses for your brand and your top 3 audiences. Final thoughts. You're halfway home. Your brand story is evolving from one of logic, reason, features, and functions to fulfilling the emotional wishes of your customers. But as you've experienced in this chapter, it's not always easy. We've raised the stakes by making you call out your villains, fog, and crevasses, and those your audiences encounter with your brand. The only way to overcome these obstacles and antagonists is to get real about them. Denial leads to drubbing. Plus, when you call them out, you co-opt their power and use their energy to make your offering all the more compelling. The tussle strengthens your character. No participation trophies here. And defining the character of your brand and determining your promise, gift, and personality is exactly what you're going to tackle next. Additional resources. If you would like to venture deeper into the dragon's cave to determine your villains, fog, and crevasses, then visit businessofstory.com/antagonists for these additional resources. Read Volume 5 of the Business of Story online magazine, Obstacles and Antagonists, How to Profit from Adversity. Listen to Jonathan David Lewis on embracing a survival mindset in your brand storytelling. Watch my quick explanation video on how to create your UVP at bit.ly/storycycle-antagonists. Look for all these links in the show notes. Your story on activity. Create an Instagram story that features 3 of your obstacles and antagonists, including a villain, a fog/blind spot, and a crevasse performance gap. Then share it with me. Instagram.com/Park Howell. Thanks so much for listening. I hope the Brand Bewitchery book and this series is helping you craft spellbinding stories for your brand using the Story Cycle system. The theme music for our show is composed by Darius Holbert, marketing by Marissa Hill, and of course it's professionally edited by Caden Howell. If I can help you and your team excel through the stories you tell, then please hit our contact page at businessofstory.com for information on in-person, virtual, and hybrid mastery courses, keynote speeches, and even a do-it-yourself storytelling training. I hope you'll join us next week when we will travel through Chapter 6 called Mentor, as I show you how to humanize your brand by determining its promise, gift, and personality. Until then, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make sure that one's epic.